Good morning. Welcome to Coffee and Conversation with Robert Joyce. Please welcome Insa's Executive Vice President, John Doyen.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us today for Insa's first Coffee and Conversation of the new year. We're pleased to welcome one of our community's senior leaders this morning. Before we begin, let me make a few housekeeping notes. We'd like to make this session as interactive as possible. So if you have questions today, please use the Q&A box on the right side of your screen. Also, we're pleased to welcome members of the press to the call today. And this is a reminder that this call is on the record. Finally, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Microsoft Azure, for their critical support of this program. We could not deliver this kind of thought leadership without the support of our partners. And now I'm pleased to welcome Mr. Eric Brown, Vice President of Mission Platforms for Microsoft Azure, who will introduce our guest. Eric, over to you.
Thank you, John. First, I would like to thank Insa for hosting this program and for all the work they have done to keep our community connected this past year. Microsoft Azure is a proud supporter of Insa. Microsoft is committing to supporting the mission-critical needs of our national security customers. Azure helps you do more for the mission with greater intelligence at the edge, unified security to protect the nation's data, and secure remote collaboration for analysts and tactical teams around the world. We continue to bring new commercial capabilities to our dedicated Azure government regions to meet the demand for greater agility in the classified space. In addition, we recently completed the build-out of new Azure government top secret region, and we're working with the U.S. government on accreditation. We're looking forward to the conversation today. Now, it's my privilege to introduce today's speaker, Rob Joyce, the Special U.S. Liaison Officer in London, the most senior NSA representative to the United Kingdom. Previously, Mr. Joyce served as the Senior Advisor to the NSA Director for Cybersecurity Strategy, following an assignment as the Special Assistant to the President and Cybersecurity Coordinator at the White House, where he led the development of national and international cybersecurity strategy and policy for the United States and oversaw implementation of those policies. In addition, Mr. Joyce served as the Acting Homeland Security Advisor, covering topics well beyond cybersecurity to include terrorism, health security, and disaster response and recovery. Past leadership roles at NSA include Chief of Tailored Access Operations and Deputy Director of the Information Assurance Directorate. Welcome, Rob.
Good morning.
Thank you, Eric. And I want to thank again Microsoft Azure for supporting this program. And Rob, good morning to you as well. I know you're in London, so we're glad you could join us this afternoon. And I just thought I'd start off our conversation today and ask you, how are things going for you and the team and your family in London with the current situation there regarding lockdown and coronavirus? How's it going?
Hey, John. It's a pleasure to be here today. I think we have to count our blessings that we're safe, we're all healthy, and we continue to be able to do our jobs here in the UK. So, well, it's not ideal for any of us. I think the embassy has done an amazing job of really creating a COVID-safe workplace, emphasizing work from home when you can, and just putting us in a position that we can stay safe. So that's good, especially in light of the severe challenges with numbers and COVID infections here in the UK.
Well, that's good to hear that you and the team are doing well and safe. I know there's always challenges to serving overseas, and now for the situation you're in right now in the UK with the coronavirus, it must be difficult. So glad to hear you're pushing through there. So you've been in the UK now for a while, and your role is the Special U.S. Liaison Officer at the U.S. Embassy in London. I'm thinking some of the people on the line today may not know exactly what the role and duties are of that position. Can you tell us some about what that entails?
Sure. So I'm the senior most NSA representative to the UK government. I'm here as to represent all of the cryptologic equities, which include the NSA's SIGINT mission, as well as the cybersecurity mission. And I'm out of the U.S. Embassy in London, a member of the ambassador's country team here. So with that, I have a role in working the relationship of NSA to all of the interagency, and then the external facing side to all of the UK government. But our first among equals is GCHQ, who's NSA's brethren over here in the UK.
Great. Sounds like you've got a pretty broad set of engagements that you're involved with every day. As you look at the US-UK relationship right now, can you tell us a little bit about how that's going and how the partnership with NSA operates?
Sure. So it's a really strong relationship. It really goes back. In fact, 2021 is going to be the 75th anniversary of the formal relationship, where in March of 1946, there was a formal agreement signed. At the start, it was the BRUSA agreement, British-USA agreement. But by May of 1955, it was updated and expanded to become UQSA, which many of the folks have heard of. But UQSA was really groundbreaking. It started with the foundational relationship that the UK and the US had, working codes and SIGINT and intelligence during World War II. And all the famous success against the German code breaking activities there. But our nations agreed formally with this document that we would share by default, and that restrictions on sharing would be an absolute minimum in things related to communications, translation, analysis, and code breaking. So those are very sensitive activities. Those are very sensitive activities inside our governments. But we chose, forged in the war, that tight relationship. We decided that was going to continue, and it would be the default. And this is really a unique policy position across the intel agencies. It's not normal for secret intelligence agencies to have this close and tight connections. And as I watch other places where the US and the UK have this very special relationship, that special relationship is no more special anywhere than at the NSA GCHQ level.
Wow. So it sounds like there's a lot of unique aspects to this partnership. As you go about, day-to-day business, how do you actually go about, solving the problems that we face that are mutual problems?
I think it starts early, where that 75-year relationship actually has us very interconnected. So besides myself, we have NSA integrees over here working in the UK, and likewise the UK has integrees back in our space. And those folks not only help to bridge and connect us, but they build personal relationships. They build that connectivity. And then we do joint projects as well. So we work on technology, we work on analysis, we share, collaborate, and partner on collection. In the cybersecurity area, we will issue, joint analysis, joint recommendations, even joint attribution and analytic activities to threats and actors that are coming at us. So it's really that connectivity that almost has a life of its own. I've got the caretaker role, not to mess it up, right? Because it already is in this impressive special place. I would highlight that the reason we have this is some of that momentum. When I joined NSA more than 30 years ago, my very first international trip anywhere was to the UK. And that was to come to a site here and install some technical equipment and help train and operate that alongside UK partners. And then it continued. In every step of my career, I've had interactions with my UK counterparts. And so we've literally grown up together. So I have relationships with UK partners that are as deep or deeper than some of my US agency counterparts, because often, the other agencies will come and go, but I've watched these people, much like the NSA people, continue from the beginning, having a career here inside this special relationship.
Great. Hey, let's talk about some mission areas. I know I'd like to talk some about great power competition and terrorism, and then also cybersecurity. But let's start with great power competition. And we know that terrorism has dominated much of the threat landscape for the numbers of years now. But with the rise of China, continuing challenges that Russia faces, Iran also can be added to the mix. In this context, how important is the US-UK partnership, and how are you leveraging that to face these challenges?
So, the problems that are important to us in the US are often really well aligned to the problems and the challenges facing the UK. And that's not an accident. I think that is a reflection of us sharing this intel at a very, very transparent and granular and sensitive way, so that our policymakers, our decision makers are seeing the same basis to form their judgments. And while at times we will come out with a different policy answer, it's not because we view the underlying bedrock issue differently. We collaborate and build up from that shared intelligence view. So for counterterrorism, 20 years ago in the US, we had a seismic shift with 9/11. We had a high priority and a focus that we wanted to ensure that a thing like 9/11 would never happen again. And so resources, priority, intention all swung massively to that problem. And we've done a really good job on it over the past 20 years. But as we start to look at the things that are existential threats, things that are impacting our nation now, it's terrorism and other issues, the ones you raised. And so what we're seeing is, while terrorism is still a top priority, we've got to find a way to move some resources to make sure that we're addressing the great power competition, we're addressing the cybersecurity challenges. We're dealing with long systemic threats that at times were not as close as terrorism. And so frankly, we're probably underinvested in a bit. And so what you're seeing now is a pretty strategic discussion of how do we rebalance, ensure the nation is still safe, but look at these other problems. And I would say that, the senior most discussions between the US, the UK, the Five Eyes are exactly wrestling with those questions, because we're always going to have more threats, more questions than the intel community of any one nation can address alone. We bring a little more might by bringing the Five Eyes together and being strategic about how we cover down on those issues. But in the end, we have to make some agreements about what's at the very top. And CT is still there, but I think great power competition is one we're going to put a lot of emphasis on today and going forward.
Thanks. Thinking about not facing challenges alone, but working with our partners. Want to shift to how that plays out in the cybersecurity area. And we have a question in regarding the SolarWinds hack, the recent SolarWinds hack. And this is from Julian Barnes, who's with the New York Times, who says, how would a system like the UK's Cybersecurity Center from GCHQ help the US government catch the hack earlier? And then also, how damaging is the hack from your perspective?
So the SolarWinds hack is a significant compromise, and if you look at how it occurred, it was a supply chain compromise, right? At its fundamentals. Supply chain compromise is not something that's new or unique. We've been addressing those for a number of years. We're attuned to them, but this one was particularly damaging in that it got into several areas of technology that we use to actually defend and trust. And so it was the trust we put into those technologies subverted and actually used to gain collection and access. So one of the things I'm worried about is how do we understand those vulnerabilities going forward, and how do we prevent big broad accesses in the future? The UK, for those that aren't aware, have an entity known as the National Cybersecurity Center, NCSC. It is actually a part of GCHQ. So they took their expertise, talent, and capabilities and are using the GCHQ platform to do national cybersecurity, to include critical infrastructure, all the way down to citizen-facing services. We've divided the pie a little differently in the U.S. We have, CISA as the lead for critical infrastructure, cybersecurity. We have a number of agencies and capabilities that lean in and support that. NSA is one element. The cybersecurity directorate at NSA has just a huge wealth and talent of technologists who can address some of these issues, as well as the SIGINT side, who is looking to understand and pursue those threats. So if you look across the Five Eyes, most of the Five Eyes, except the US, have put their national cybersecurity mission inside that peer to NSA. But in the US, there's just such a massive amount of entities and folks that have a role, whether it's FBI, DOJ, Department of Commerce, NIST, NSA, DOD. So we just have so much bigger amount of people involved that it's been difficult to centralize in the way that some of the partner nations have. I think the Solarium Commission has done a good job at looking at that problem and making some recommendations to harmonize it. A number of their recommendations were picked up in the NDAA and will start to be enacted now that the NDAA is passed. And so I think we'll constantly iterate, learn, and evolve from what other countries are doing, as well as look at where the areas are that we can optimize in the U.S.
Okay. Hey, you've mentioned the Five Eyes partners a couple of times now, and I'm thinking, we have a wide variety of people joining us today, from students and others. So the Five Eyes, right, are the U.S., the UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. And so thinking about our partnership with them, can you assess, what are the cyber capabilities of our Five Eye partners, and what are the strengths or vulnerabilities that might be there, and how do we address those?
So I think starting at the base level, the strength we all bring is the SIGINT agencies, the cybersecurity agencies, the code breaking entities have years and years of experience at looking at the technology and understanding the vulnerabilities. I've had a number of opportunities to be on both sides of that fence, the white hat or the black hat, right? And the idea that it takes a thief to catch a thief is one that I've actually subscribed to. The idea that by actually performing the exploitation of others in the pursuit of our foreign intelligence mission, we understand what really makes for good security and where some activities that may be well resourced or well intended really don't have the effect and impact you would hope. And so I think that's one of the strengths of this Five Eyes community is all of these entities who do both the efforts to protect our classified networks, our most vital secrets, and then build that knowledge on top of what we've been able to achieve to produce intelligence. That's a huge value. The other place I would say is a strength is just the diversity. NSA is a real priority to try to build a diverse workforce, and we're always stretching to try to bring in and add to our internal diversity, because what we found is diversity of thought gives us better outcomes in analysis. It gives us innovative approaches to come at problems. And just by the very nature, the Five Eyes Alliance gives us diversity, right? These are other nations, another set of workforces. As aligned as our cultures are, they are still different, and we all approach problems differently. One things we see on the US side is we will often bring an amount of resources that our partners just can't muster on a problem. And so we come at it with one approach. They may have a very resource limited approach to solving a problem that just by necessity is creative, divergent, and different. And that in and of itself brings strength to us, because we'll be exposed to that new idea, new way to work. Or it may be even that we bring the big resource thing to the problem, and then they make it run that much more efficient because they take the way they would have worked it without resources, and we overlay it on top of the resources, and we get a much better outcome. So I think those are the two big areas where we have a huge advantage, is that technical focus, understanding on both sides, and then the diversity of thought and approaches.
Great. Hey, I want to remind people, we have lots of people listening today, over 500, but please submit your questions and we'll try to get to as many as possible. And I'd like to shift now to one from Teresa Shea with Raytheon. And Teresa asked, can you share with us any lessons learned from the UK approach to cybersecurity that might benefit the US?
So I would say that the number one thing I think the UK is doing that the US would benefit from is we need to better leverage industry. And when I say that, the UK has a program they call the Industry 100, where they bring in industry to sit down together. So there's cross-fertilization amongst industry, but also with the government. And they have deep technical conversations about the topic of the day, whether it be how do they reduce the vulnerability, or whether it be how do they respond to a compromise, or what they could share in terms of what's being seen at one industry that might actually be a problem but unrecognized in another. And this Industry 100 approach has really paid off for them. And it not only builds an information exchange, but it builds that same kind of trust I've talked about that I have with my UK partners and the GCHQ peers that we've served in the intelligence foxholes together, right? Now these folks are serving together in the cybersecurity foxholes to make sure that information's moving. And when you look at the commercial industry, for the US, the vast majority of the critical infrastructure is owned and operated, not by the government. In some countries it is, but not in our case. And so we've got to make sure that we're supplying the government resourced capabilities that are necessary to defend that critical infrastructure in a close collaborative way with industry. And so I think that's the best way, the best thing I've learned out of the UK that they're doing that we haven't optimized around yet.
Do you see anything in the US that exists today that could help or that's similar to that type of industry engagement that you just described, that could be either built on or expanded in some way?
Yeah, there are a number of places, right? The ISACs, the information sharing efforts with and amongst industry are kind of envisioned like that, but we didn't get quite on the same level as this UK partnership. You know, at CISA, they have industry representatives sitting on the watch floors from a couple key elements. And so there is, you know, I'm not saying we don't have those good relationships, but the question is, are they optimized in the way that the UK has done? I would say not yet.
Okay. Hey, we have another question here, kind of related to that, which is from Lee Watson with the Forge Institute, who asked, you know, can you compare and contrast the government private sector threat intelligence sharing in the UK versus the US?
The threat intelligence sharing goes back to my same answer, right? I think there's a little bit more exposure in the UK to industry. I know that there is a bit more attention and effort at getting information at the unclassified level out to industry. But I would also say that, you know, that's been a really strong focus in the U.S. over the past year with the stand-up of the cybersecurity directorate at NSA. And you will see strong examples over the past year of NSA, sometimes in collaboration with the UK, but going out with things that we know and understand and trying to put actionable insights out there, whether it be tradecraft, right? We all understand that sharing indicators of compromise is one way to defend against some of these nation state attacks. But in reality, the sophistication of those adversaries means that often the IP addresses and domain names and other things really aren't relevant. They're so tailored to one attack that understanding the tradecraft and understanding the broad intent, the methodology and some of the unique features of these activities is much more valuable than sharing any one indicator. And so it's rising up above that we're really looking to get to.
Mm-hmm. Hey, there are a couple of questions then about China and the China threat, and especially with regard to cyber. So Joshua Lin at PayPal asks, how are the US, UK, and other Five Eye members working together regarding China on the cyber front?
So I think as you understand where the threats emerge and come from, there's a set of actors that we're particularly worried about. China is one, Russia, Iran, North Korea. Nobody's surprised by any of those, right? But those are the programs that really have resources, have done some bold and audacious things at times, and really pose a threat both to government networks, critical infrastructure networks, and even some of the corporate networks. And it's this sharing and focus on techniques, tradecraft, infrastructure, and some of the strategies that are coming out where the intent is to not let the adversary hold the high ground and continue to have the advantage. Right? If you look at some of the strategies emerging all the way up from the national strategies in the US, the defense strategies, cybercom strategy, the idea of continuous engagement, persistent engagement, the idea that we're not going to let an adversary just keep trying and trying and trying until they succeed, that there needs to be some amount of disruptive effort placed against their capabilities, their infrastructure, that keeps them from having the optimal capability to prosecute for their goals. So we're working with the UK, the Five Eyes, and other global partners, frankly, to make sure that we're doing what we can to make sure those programs are not able to achieve their outcomes. And some of that is the intelligence sharing. Some of it is the government taking on that role of persistent engagement. And then some of it is the whole set of tools that we get out in the whole of government toolbox, where DOJ is leveraging, indictments and prosecutions, and State Department is pursuing diplomatic channels, and the intel communities are sharing information, and then industry is leaning in on some of the things that have been consistently problematic and troublesome. So, it's that broad approach that's going to help us.
Okay. Hey, we're getting a couple questions in about Brexit. And one that's typical of them is from Barbara Fast in Alabama. By the way, congratulations to all the Alabama fans out there. I'm sure you're very happy today. But Barbara Fast asked, how is the alliance holding up as we have changes due to things such as Brexit?
So the good news is that, in the US case with the UK, the intelligence and security activities are not typically chartered through any relationship directly through the EU. They are typically direct, right? The NSA UK UQSA agreement, as I said, goes back 75 years, and that started as a bilateral thing. We leverage it into other partnership spaces to include some European activities and others. But we are strong and solid before Brexit. After Brexit, there's essentially no impact. The UK partner is working through some of their details of how information shares and flows in things like some of the criminal activity, and so there's still work to be done by the UK on data sharing, data privacy regulations, and other activities. That's probably the area we're paying the most attention to. But the intelligence collaboration and cooperation doesn't have any bumps.
Good. Glad to hear that things are continuing to be strong in that relationship. Hey, we're also getting a couple of questions in, Rob, regarding expansion of Five Eyes. And so typical one is, do you see the Five Eyes partnerships expanding to include other nations?
Yeah, I don't get a vote on that one, right? That's well above my pay grade. I think there are and need to be other really key intelligence partnerships, with the US, with the UK. But I don't get to talk to or decide about, whether the Five Eyes expands or not expands.
Okay. Well, another Five Eyes question, and this one is from Marcel Letro with Lockheed. He asked, what is the one recommendation you would have for the new DNI regarding improving the Five Eyes partnership? Something that you would think of if you were asked what you could do to improve the Five Eyes partnership, especially with the UK, but more broadly the Five Eyes, what might that be?
I don't have a good and ready answer at that, because that's the generic work of the day, right? I really do believe that we have such a close relationship and a fundamental architecture and infrastructure that supports and enables us to be successful, that there's no glaring thing that we've got to push on. I would say that, we in the Five Eyes really need to focus on the next problems, not the last war we all fought together. And by that, I mean, we've got to come up and really focus on great power competition. What are we going to do in the worlds of China? How are we going to address the cybersecurity issues that grow and morph? There's a number of technologies that we have to pay attention to and make sure we're ahead of and investing in. So across that waterfront, what I would really say is, we need to be focused on the horizon, not at the near-term problems. And because it will take time and resources and potentially, authorities or capabilities to address those long-term strategic things, those are the ones that we've got to ensure we're investing in now, because if you always hold them off till tomorrow, when you need them, they're not ready and not there.
Okay. Hey, we have another question in from Dave Roper with BAE, and he asked, are we working with the UK with their joint cybersecurity technology development? So kind of getting into the technology development area, what is the UK's perspective with regard to our ongoing cybersecurity efforts?
So, the one thing I don't get to do as the U.S. representative over here in the UK is, represent them. So I won't take the last half of that question. But there is across the board good collaboration on technology, and that technology includes the fundamental capabilities that we use in the intel community, the fundamental capabilities we use in the militaries, and a growing amount of cybersecurity collaboration where the innovation engines in both countries put out new and unique creative ideas to solve some of the problems. And then we both get fresh looks at it because we bring that diversity of thought and approaches to the problem. So the collaboration is good in that space.
Oh, good. And let's circle back to something you mentioned a little while ago, the Cyber Solarium Commission. And as you mentioned, a lot of those things have been enacted now as part of the NDAA. And we have a question in about the new National Cyber Director. And it's basically, what type of person do you think that should be as far as the role or the skill sets that person would have? And the question comes from a reporter, Sean Waterman, who asked what level of technical expertise would be appropriate for the new National Cyber Director. These White House czar posts often are held by people with policy legal backgrounds as opposed to technical ones. What are your views on that?
So I'm of the opinion the number one important characteristic for the National Cyber Director is collaboration. Right? They need to be able to unite the many different pieces of the government that have expertise and a really important mission in cyber, and bring them together so that the piece parts are harmonized and really operating effectively. I benefited from the ability to have some technical background at the White House. I thought it served me well. Is it a prerequisite that you can't be successful without technical capabilities? I certainly wouldn't say that, right? But I'm biased as a technologist that having some technical chops is a good thing.
Okay, and there's a related question, which is from Jim Kefford at Lockheed, who says hello to you, by the way. And he says, given your White House experience, what advice would you have to someone coming into the new NSC staff or in a cyber role, such as Ann Neuberger? What advice would you have to someone taking on that role?
So hi back to Jim, and almost every name you've named so far is somebody from my past. So I don't want them all to feel
Rob Fan Club is here today, so
all of the others as well. But thanks. The NSC role, the NSC is a really vital component of the overall White House, and the proximity of the NSC to decision makers and the action arms of government, make that a vital place. So advice there is, again, that level needs to be very strategic. Right? They need to pull and move the levers of government to optimize us for the next problem. You've got to put some energy into today's problems, but you can't get sucked can't get overly consumed by today's problems. So that's the best advice I can give. As to the candidates, I haven't seen any official announcements yet. I've seen all the same, things that are flowing in media and Twitter. The names out there are awesome, but we all have to wait until the team's named.
Okay. Hey, we have a question here back to the China issue. And Lincoln Hardesty asked, what is the state of the debate over Chinese participation in the UK's 5G network? Is the UK pushing, or is UK government pushing European countries to keep China out of their networks? And if so, does it have any real influence?
Yeah, so the UK is a thought leader for the European markets. And I think that's why the discussions around Huawei were so important as we started to understand the threats and concern with Huawei. The UK has taken a leadership role in talking about how they plan to address the existing, and that was a huge problem, the existing quantities of Huawei in their infrastructure. But now they have a really clear set of policies. They have timelines for how they're going to move forward, and that is tremendously influential to other nations who look and say, if the US and the UK, who have all of these resources and technical capabilities, don't feel they can mitigate the risk, what's our chance of mitigating that risk as well? And so it's been really helpful to have their thought leadership and their efforts in this area.
Okay, and we're about to close our time for this conversation today. So I do have one more question here, and that is, as we start the new year, what worries you the most, and what gives you the most optimism? What are you most optimistic about?
Yeah. So I'll break it into two worries. Again, I'll go back to that theme of great power competition, and the long-term challenge from China. That's something that we really have to get strategies, capabilities, and partners working on. Right, we're already working it today, but I think that's the area that really needs our attention. The second half of what worries me is the pandemic. We can't operate normally. And by normally, I mean, I'm a liaison officer over here in the UK, where there's not many meetings and liaisons going on. The good news is, we have all sorts of infrastructure and digital capabilities, both secure and on the internet to interact, but there's no substitute to that personal engagement. And so I want to ensure that we figure out how to get back to that and return to some normalcy. So those are the two worries I put up there. What am I optimistic about? I'm optimistic about the partnerships, the strengths of that, and the direction we're headed in. It's all just awesome. I'm also optimistic that at a tactical sense, we learned a lot in the pandemic. In the Intel community, John, you and I have talked about how we grew up and lived in SCIFs, right? And even unclass work still happened in the SCIF and on the high side, because that's the infrastructure we had and we used, and that's where everybody was. The pandemic has really forced us to rethink, what work needs to be classified and what work can be done on the low side. And while it's not perfect, we've come an enormously long way in a very few short set of months. I think a lot's going to stick. I think we've learned some of those lessons. We've worked some infrastructure. We've exercised some muscles that really were dormant and we were reluctant to use in the past. And I think that's going to be one good silver lining out of the pandemic, is really broadening the thinking on what can and should we be doing on the low side.
Great. Well, Rob, I think we're out of time now. And again, I just want to thank you for spending some time with us this morning and sharing your candid thoughts. And for everyone that's watching online, thank you so much for joining us today. Once again, I also want to thank Microsoft Azure for their support of this program. Looking ahead, we do have some more events scheduled that we hope you'll be able to join us for. And later this month, on January the 27th, we will welcome the Director of Naval Intelligence, Vice Admiral Jeffrey Trussler, to the program. The following week, we will welcome Lieutenant General Mary O'Brien, who's the Air Force's Deputy Chief of Staff for ISR and Cyber Effects Operations, for a coffee conversation. And on February the 11th, we're pleased to have a leadership luncheon with the new DIA Director, General Scott Barrier. And we'd also like to remind everyone that on February the 17th, we will host our annual Insa Achievement Awards, where we honor the extraordinary contributions of early to mid-career national security, IC, and Homeland Security professionals. And we're pleased that Stacy Dixon will give the keynote for that event. As always, you can visit us online at insaonline.org for all the details and registration information for these and other programs. When today's webinar ends, there'll be a short survey that'll pop up on your screen. We hope you'll take a minute to fill that out for us. We read them all, and we value your input and what you have to say to us. And that concludes this morning's program. Stay safe and healthy, and have a good day.